Welcome back to Killer Fun, where we explore the intersection of crime and entertainment every other week. I'm Christy.
And I'm Jackie.
And today, we are talking about the one.
Oh, that's a phrase, isn't it?
Oh, it's a phrase that every girl who's ever been a teenager knows. They're looking for the one.
I've known a lot of guys also who spent a lot of time talking about the one.
No, yeah, and evangelical circles, where a lot of purity culture is pushed.
Oh gosh, yeah.
It's all about the
one.
The one that God has planned for me. Let me clue you in.
Ooh, soapbox alert. Go.
There's not the one.
Amen, sister.
As much as the romantic notion and ideal of a perfect, fated love, any number of people can be the one. And you may end up with more than the one in your lifetime. It could be a relationship that breaks down.
It can be.
It could be a spouse who passes away.
Yes.
It could be any number of things. But just because a relationship ends doesn't mean that it was unsuccessful.
Or unmeaningful.
Or unimportant.
Right.
That you can have more than the one.
Yes.
I mean, I'm super lucky because I really, just adore the heck out of my husband. And we've been together a really long time. I met him when I was 18 years old, and we've been together ever since. We've been together a long time. He is the one. Do I think that he's the only person that I could have had a successful relationship with? No.
Yeah, the one is not about what the universe or even God chooses for you.
Or your genetics.
Or your genetics, as we'll get into that for sure. But the one is about who you choose. That's the point.
Exactly.
Your choice matters. And if you go into it blaming somebody else from the start about why you're even together, you're not going to handle conflict very well either. Because this is about the people in the relationship. And, if you have the one mentality, every conflict, every challenge, every change is an existential crisis.
Right.
And that's just unsustainable.
Well, and it doesn't allow for growth.
Right.
Because, trust me, if you think that you're the same person that you were when you met your significant other a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 some years ago.
Look at her trying to skirt it. I will not tell you how old I am. You can do math. Crap.
I was really young when we got together.
You said 18.
Yeah. I was 18 when we got together, and I'm not going to say how long we've been married or how long we've been together exactly. So
it's acceptable.
It's well into double digits, but where was I going with this? I'm all flustered now.
You were talking about change. How you're not the same person.
Yeah, exactly. You're not the same person.
You're not the same person.
I'm certainly not the same person that I was at 18. And has it always been easy to be married? No. It hasn't been easy for me. It hasn't been easy for him.
Right. I mean, we change.
But you know what? I still really adore him.
Yeah. People change. And people change in different rates.
Right.
Too. So sometimes that's kind of there's just a lot going on there. And that's why you have to be so focused on, I choose. And that's so important. But
that's right.
The one.
Yeah, the one. What happens if you don't get along with the one?
Oh my gosh. Can you even imagine? How, if you were legitimately matched via DNA and they said this is the person who is meant for you and you're like, I really dislike them.
Yeah. This is a narcissist. I'm supposed to be with a narcissist because it ignores a whole lot of things.
A whole lot of things.
So many things. So
all of nature.
Yeah, we'll get into all of
and
it.
all of nurture.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
So in case you didn't realize, we watched The One.
Yes.
And this show is, I really did like it.
Yeah. I don't know how far you've gotten in it. Have you
watched the first episode.
And that's it?
That is it. That's all I did.
It gets more intriguing.
Ooh, I can see that.
Yeah.
I mean, I was roped in.
Yeah.
My husband was not.
Okay, I can see that.
He did not so much like it, but
Okay.
that's okay. It's
I
not
can
really
see
his
that.
kind of show.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, let's talk about who's in it.
Yeah,
Because a lot of these people were new faces to me.
Oh, definitely me too.
Yeah, they're a lot, mostly British actors. So not if you don't watch a ton of British television, you don't recognize them.
There was one face I recognized, and that was it.
Yeah. So Hannah Ware plays Rebecca. She has also been in a show with Kelsey Grammer on Starz called Boss. And she was in Betrayal on ABC. So if she looks familiar, that's probably why. Dimitri Leonidas plays James. He's in Riviera with Julia Stiles. Which
I've never seen that.
I haven't either, but people are like, the first 2 seasons are amazing, and after that, well, it's still good. But
how many shows do we save that out?
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot. But he was also in The Monuments Men with George Clooney. Now, the face I recognized was this guy, Amir El-Masri, who plays Ben, because he's in Amazon Prime's Jack Ryan.
Oh, yes.
That's where I recognized him from. Lois Chimimba plays Hannah. She was in a medical drama called Trust Me and AMC's Discovery of Witches, which is kind of blown up recently.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like a bingeable. There's a couple seasons out, and there's another season coming. So people are like, ooh, Discovery of Witches, binge it before the next one comes out.
Okay.
Yeah. Eric Kofi Abrifa plays Mark. He was in the period drama Harlots and the Jason Bourne spinoff Treadstone. Zoe Tapper plays Kate. She was in the sci-fi original Night Flyers.
Oh, interesting.
Do you know anything about
No,
that?
not at
I'm
all.
almost afraid to tell you.
Why? Why?
Because it's based on a set of short stories by George R.R. Martin.
I
know.
I am remiss.
You have big feelings.
I have a serious deficit in my life immediately now. I must see this.
Okay.
Because I love George R.R. Martin.
I know, but I also know that you're mad at him for not writing
yes,
any
I
more
am.
Game of Thrones books.
I'm
and then
so
he
mad.
went and did this short stories.
And I know he's done some of those. And I just, I've got to go watch that.
Okay.
I mean, I really am mad at him, but I love him still.
And then Greg Chillen plays Nick. And he's also in a Discovery of Witches.
Oh.
So if those people look familiar,
That's why.
that would be why. So a little recap.
Yeah, let's recap this episode.
Before I do that, I don't know if you noticed this, but very few characters have their names said timely or appropriately.
Yeah, no, nobody says anything about names.
I mean,
for a very, very
Rebecca.
Long time.
That's like
it.
the name we know. You maybe know Ethan because she mentions him like in her first scene.
Yeah, it's like a very, I feel like it's a very specific way they've outlined the names.
Yeah.
Based on like Rebecca's point of view.
Yeah, how they're oriented to her.
Yeah.
Yeah, how they are play in her orbit. Mm-hmm. If they get an outside storyline, it's because it's how it relates to Rebecca.
Yes.
Throughout the entire, I've watched all of them. So, because I just do that. I'm
Yes,
like,
you
I get
do.
started and then I'm like, oh, well, while I'm cooking.
So just keep going.
Just
Yep.
go ahead, play the next one. Play the next one. Next thing I know, it's done.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely realized that there was not a whole lot of names going on.
That said, I didn't find it particularly difficult to follow.
Oh no, it was easy.
Yeah, they did a really good job of having the characters have their own separate spaces so you could follow their storylines. It was easy to tell what was a flashback and what wasn't. Rebecca looked different. The only people that I wish had been distinguished a little more from each other were James and Ben.
Okay.
Because they look a little bit alike.
Okay.
And most of the scenes that they're in are really dimly lit. So they look just a little bit alike and it's pretty dimly lit. And so it can be, if you're not paying close attention, it can be difficult to tell which one is which. Like, wait, is that the roommate, or is that the guy she works with? And especially you see them together, you're like, wait, which one's which?
So I didn't have that issue.
You didn't have that issue?
They looked totally different to me.
I mean, they look different, but they're both like dark haired, kind of olive complected. And if you're not, I wish they just showed them more brightly lit a little more.
Yeah.
Or said their names a little more often.
Yeah.
Something to give me a little like way to make a mental map around this.
Yeah.
So.
And maybe that was on purpose.
And maybe
Maybe they want you asking that question. Which one's the roommate? Which one's the one she works with? Because there is a bit of a web going on.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So maybe that's on purpose, but maybe not.
No. All right. With that said.
Okay.
Let's get into this recap. So Rebecca Webb is CEO of a company called The One. She is standing on a stage extolling its virtues to a group in a really fabulous venue.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
It's so beautiful. And we learn a little bit about her and that she thinks everyone deserves the fairy tale, which, of course, The One can offer.
That's her opinion.
Yes. And she concludes her speak with this passionate kiss with her husband, Ethan. So meanwhile, you kind of get the impression that these are happening simultaneously, though maybe not.
Yeah.
In the general gist, there's a body found in the Thames River in London. And this is our murder that we've been talking about.
Right up front.
Right up front.
Just like a Law and Order episode.
We don't know for sure that it's a murder yet, but it comes to light that that's what the detectives believe.
Yeah.
After some forensic research. So this turns out to be Ben, Rebecca's roommate, who had gone missing 18 months before, and Rebecca was the person who'd reported Ben missing. Kate and Nick are the detectives who are checking into this. It initially points to suicide. Then they get some information that makes them want to look into it a little bit further. And everybody is talking about matching.
Everybody. It's everywhere.
It's everywhere. There's advertisements everywhere. Everyone's talking about, are they going to get matched? Have they been matched? How happy are they? They would never do it. They would always do it. They're, everything. Everybody's talking about it all the time. So Nick says he'll never be matched because his girlfriend's pregnant, and he makes a point of saying with their first child.
Yes,
which
this
seems
is a commitment.
Yes, he is in this for the long haul. He's expecting to have more children with this woman. But Kate has been matched, and she's been matched surprisingly with a woman.
Yeah,
who lives in Spain named Sophia. So Sophia ends up traveling. They have this instant connection, even though they've only met online.
Right. Well, that's easy to do when somebody tells you that they're your perfect person.
Right.
It's an amazing setup, y'all.
Yeah. Exactly.
This is not an objective meeting. Okay, I digress.
Yeah. So Sophia flies to London to meet Kate, and then she unfortunately is involved in a tragic accident before they can meet and ends up in the hospital. Hannah and her journalist husband, Mark, seem very, very much in love. They obviously just adore one another. But we see her send some hair off in an envelope to The One for analysis. And we see that she later gets the results on a tablet.
Yes.
And is trying to hide that from Mark. Meanwhile, Mark, a journalist, is working on a profile of Rebecca, but it's really obvious that he's not a fan.
Yeah, he's not going to get matched. That's not what he's in for, because he has Hannah.
Yeah.
And that's...
Yeah, and that's good for him, and he sees all kinds of issues and heartbreak, and he doesn't like Rebecca and doesn't think that she's a very good person. Fair.
Yeah, fair.
We get to know more about Rebecca through her flashbacks. We learn that she had a partner in the science behind The One, which was James. She's a brilliant PhD. So is James. James is still alive, but he's no longer a part of the company, but he was instrumental in its founding. And we come to know that Ben isn't just Rebecca's flatmate, that he was very interested in a romantic relationship with Rebecca. The episode ends with some intentionally confusing images of violent flashbacks. We know that they're flashbacks. It's difficult to tell what's happening, but people are being hurt.
But something's happening.
Yeah, something's
going on.
Instrumental to what you need to know about James and Ben and Rebecca is happening, but you don't know quite what it is.
No.
And that's where they leave you.
Yeah, pretty much.
To like pull you in. Come back for another episode.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yep.
There we go. Critic thoughts are wishy-washy.
I can imagine that they go every which direction.
Right. So this Joel Calfee from Pure Wow kind of wondered if the murder was even necessary. So first of all, he says, it feels like it belongs in Black Mirror, which I'm like, yes.
It totally could.
It totally could. If Black Mirror did anthology seasons,
yes,
this could be part of Black Mirror.
Yeah.
They do anthology episodes.
So, I could even see it condensed into a little short story, but I've only watched the first episode, so I don't know how complex it gets later. But the murder, I don't know. I've only watched the first episode, so that's an interesting assessment that they feel like but I can see it only because it is so heavy in discussions of ethics and policy and regulation that to throw the crime in there almost feels like less important than all the rest of the conversation.
Well, and that's exactly what he says.
Oh, man. Okay.
That's it. Exactly. That it's just something maybe that they felt like they had to include because a lot of shows are doing that lately.
Everybody wants to be crimey.
Everybody wants to be crimey, but maybe it wasn't necessary. But that it's there is the only reason that we're covering it. Mm-hmm. So,
Okay. Well, yeah, true.
He also kind of thought that it was interesting to have a woman in this anti-hero role, that she kind of is playing the part of a Tony Soprano or a Walter White, where she's kind of an anti-hero and you're kind of trying to figure out who you're rooting for. Mm-hmm. And I didn't love Rebecca to start. Now, see, that's the thing. I really liked Walter White at the beginning of Breaking Bad.
Right. And then
because they made him a very empathetic character. Mm-hmm. You maybe even felt a little sorry for him. And then he kind of grows into his own. And but makes him far less likable.
Far less likable. Far more entertaining, though.
Yes.
I can understand that, but I don't see it as being particularly interesting that they chose a woman for it.
I think they were just saying how nice it was to see that there was a woman cast in that kind of role.
Okay. Yeah. No. See,
women
that makes sense.
Tend to be more empathetic characters, and that you kind of get maybe somebody to love to hate. Yeah. Somebody who's powerful in their own right, in a way, as the woman is not unheard of. Certainly
not, but not near done enough.
But not as common. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There were a number of critics on Rotten Tomatoes who didn't love it. They didn't feel, I doubt the one is anyone's perfect match, said Lucy Mangan from The Guardian. Matthew Gilbert from the Boston Globe said, perhaps I'd feel differently if Ware was a little more fun as the ruthless boss with no scruples. She's humorless and not quite the kind of TV villain who makes bad into good entertainment. Which I'm like, that's fair, because I don't want to compare too much, but when you look at a true villain like Villanelle from Killing Eve and how much fun she is, she's horrible. But she's super likable. Yes. Because she's so interesting. I don't want to be friends with her, but she's a fascinating character and I want to see what she does. And she's got a sense of humor, and Rebecca's a little flat.
She is.
And I wish there was a little more.
That makes sense.
Yeah. It's based on a book of the same name by a man named John Marrs. Mm-hmm. But it's based on it. It's not adapted from it.
Okay.
Which is a nice distinction, because Decider says basically, if you liked the show, check out the book. There's a whole new plot for you to enjoy that's similar enough to the series to make you feel like you're diving into a new season.
Oh, okay.
Now, I wish they had followed the book a little bit more, because they're in the book, there's a serial killer who uses the service because he wants to murder 30 women. And I'm like, now that's the murder backstory that I want.
Yeah, right?
I really want the person who's figured out how to manipulate system to murder people. Mm-hmm. I care less. I mean, not that Ben wasn't fine. What a ringing endorsement. Not that Ben wasn't fine. But that's the murder story that I wanted.
Yeah, that's a far more interesting crimey thing.
And a nice meaty secondary story.
That's true.
Although
it's interesting because the murder is definitely what brought us to it.
Right.
And we dived in because of that crimey. But I feel like in this time, the ethics and the regulation discussions themselves, the bribery that's going on like behind the scenes on the upper levels, like that's crimey too.
It is crimey.
There's such a crimey element in the whole thing that's kind of subdued. And so that was what actually intrigued me definitely more than the murder plot.
But even that could have been more fun.
Probably so. Definitely so.
Yeah. Because it was interesting.
Yeah, it was interesting.
And I could see what was coming. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a surprise to me, really.
No.
But I wish it was a little more fun.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be back with Is It True? Psychology Break and Real Life right after these brief messages.
A commercial, like a 90-second commercial about ourselves.
Yeah, that's what it's supposed to be. It's a promo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Join Kat and Chelsea. You're going to laugh. You might cry. Maybe you'll question yourself. Maybe you'll question everything. I mean, all we're doing, we're talking about aliens. We're talking about assassinations. We're talking about child pornography rings. Realistically. All right, so is that good enough for the promo?
No.
I don't like promos.
It's okay. Well, you have to do it anyway. I'm Catherine Doherty.
I'm Chelsea Potts.
And we are the hosts of Obviously It's Fake, the podcast. Join us every Monday as we discuss conspiracy theories and misinformation, both current and throughout history. But I guess make it comedy also.
Hey, Kat. You know what I love about our podcast?
What's that, Chelsea?
That you can listen to it on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere you like to listen to your streaming.
Oh my God, that's such a great point. And you know what else, Chelsea?
What's that, Kat? It's too much.
You're making it complicated. It's getting all kinds of complicated.
I'm sorry, it's too much.
Obviously, it's fake.com for more information.
So here's how it works. Christy wrecks her search history. Hey, NSA, we promise it's nothing more nefarious than a podcast. To find out what's true, some of the psychological motivations behind the characters' actions, and real-life applications that relate to our topic. I have no idea what Christy decided to look up. Could be the same thing that captured my curiosity or something I never thought of.
All right, is it true? So that beautiful auditorium that Rebecca was in.
Please tell me that exists.
It really does. It looks like a mini Sydney Opera House.
Thank you, it does.
And I'm like, is that just I was trying to figure out if it was just the angle, if it was the Sydney Opera House and it was just the angle that they were at to, but it didn't look big enough.
It definitely wasn't big enough.
Right.
I definitely wondered if it was related to the same architects and things of that sort.
Well, that I don't know, but it is a real place that you can go and visit. It's the Tenerife in the Canary Islands. It's an auditorium in Spain that you can go and visit, and it's just
Tenerife. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And that makes sense.
Yeah. So, it's an
airport.
International company. I think that's what they were trying to tell you from the beginning.
Right.
And then Rebecca was blackmailing the politician.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And they were at a fabulous restaurant.
Oh, yes, it was very beautiful.
Yeah. Oh, in Trafalgar Square in London, it's a real restaurant called The Rooftop. I know. Like, someday.
Yes.
Someday, once the UK variant's less of an issue.
Day. Okay, I will say the other location was James's house. Oh. As soon as they got to James's house, are you there? Oh, yay.
Let me see if I have any information about that.
Because I was like, oh my gosh, it's so gorgeous.
Oh, no, they didn't know. The writers of this but where is James Whitting's home? Does the landscape give you a clue? They didn't know, they couldn't find it.
Oh my God.
So they found all kinds of places, many of which are not in this episode. There's a yoga studio and the fantastic beach, and there's so many beautiful locations for you to get to yet. All right. So when they found Ben's body, it was pretty intact.
It fairly was, I thought.
Yeah. That's very unlikely.
Yeah, 18 months.
18 months in the rushing
Thames in the water.
River.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's cold.
Yeah.
It's cold water.
Now that does make a difference somehow, right?
It does. It depends on the water, though. So there's a Great Lake. I don't remember which one here in the U.S. But it's very cold, and it's very deep, and it's very still.
Okay.
Okay? So if a body sinks, it won't decompose as you might expect it to.
Because it's sort of encased.
Right. Well, because it's so cold that then organisms that would make your body start to decompose from within aren't able to function.
Right, right.
So theoretically, it could be relatively intact dead bodies all over, and nobody would know it because it's so deep and so cold and so still. The bodies won't end up floating back.
Okay. By the way, this is not an endorsement of a body dump place. Okay,
no,
just FYI. Don't try that at home.
I'm not even gonna look up which lake it is. I'm not even gonna do that. If you want to do that, that's on you.
It's on you.
I don't want to hear about it. I want to hear about all kinds of stuff from you, the listener. But this is not the one. If you've dumped a body there, I don't want to know about it.
I don't want to know about that.
No, I don't want to know about that. But this is a relatively shallow...
Yeah.
I mean, it's deep because it's a very large river.
It is.
It's deep enough for many ships and things. It's traffic, but it's flowing. Mm-hmm. That body was way too intact. So, Science Alert reported on a Canadian researchers who wanted to find out how quickly bodies decomposed underwater.
Okay.
This was something they were trying to figure out so that they can tell divers what kind of body to be looking for.
Right.
If they're diving and looking for a body, this is what you should be looking for based on how long the person's been missing, how long we think they've been in the water.
Okay.
So they submerged a couple of pigs.
Okay.
Pigs, because they're roughly human-sized and they share a lot of similar biology.
Right, right.
They're very like us in a lot of ways, the way their organs are, the way their tissues are formed, things like that. They're good research subjects because we can't just go stick a body down there.
No, that's interesting though, because I would have thought their skin would be so much more thick that it would change. Because I feel like our skin is so much more fragile, whereas a pig skin feels like a pig skin.
Uh-huh. Well, yeah, yes.
So that's interesting.
But for these purposes,
it's enough.
Similar. Yeah, it's similar enough. So they put a couple of pig carcasses in the Strait of Georgia, which is a very deep body of water between Vancouver Island and British Columbia. Mm-hmm. So it's not particularly still. It's not, but it is deep and cold, and the water is pretty oxygenated, which would be sort of similar when you have a lot of either flowing water or a lot of traffic that stirs things up, it's going to oxygenate the water more. And that it turns out that bodies actually decompose much faster under those circumstances than they had originally thought.
Oh, interesting.
That they had thought that it would survive for weeks or months. And what they actually found was that in deep water, that it was skeletonized in 4 days.
What? Oh, I'm sorry. Holy crap.
And it was because of organisms and things that live in the water.
4 days?
4 days. There's like little shrimps and things that went and ate them. So, okay. So even if these little shrimps didn't exist in the Thames, which I don't believe that they do, there are fish and other organisms. He would not have had the opportunity to sort of mummify the way that he did. He absolutely would have been skeletonized by then. I'm 99% sure.
Oh my gosh, 4 days.
Yeah, 4 days. They were skeletonized.
I mean, even if you said, okay, well, that just happened too extremely fast, and you added some, percentages and looked at the, standard deviation or the, the error and all of that kind of stuff. Like when you start at 4 days, that's like, what?
Well, and they did that twice. They did it in the fall and the spring and had similar results both times.
Water is corrosive.
Extremely. All right. So how much attraction is determined by your genes?
Let's do it. Let's get into this.
So Dr. Sarah Seabrook works for a company called Instant Chemistry, and she did an interview with DNA Weekly. They were looking at which genes affect personality and how those can play into relationship dynamics. But they also, in their evaluations, include a psychological assessment, which I think is key. Something the one did not at all. Like send in your hairs and then you get matched.
They did not eHarmony that at all.
Not even a little. There's somewhat a physical attraction that can be determined by your genes, but it's way, way, way more about psychological factors.
Absolutely.
I mean they put this whole report together, but it's not a report that says whether you should or should not be with your partner. It's this is things that your partner can't change about themselves. Here's how to make your relationship work better.
Yes, and that's the important part here because maybe your genes play some role in your attraction, like maybe you have a type. Maybe whatever. But none of that guarantees or it determines a relationship that's healthy.
Right.
Like, so I really like Lavazza coffee. It's my coffee, man. I love Lavazza coffee.
It's so good.
I swear there's a DNA situation going on there. Like it's in my genes and I express it and I love the Lavazza. It doesn't mean that I buy Lavazza all the time, right? Like there's other coffees I like a lot that are, well, frankly, less expensive.
Yeah.
And see, that makes it for a better relationship with my money. And I'm willing to sacrifice my intense attraction to Lavazza coffee because everything else is more compatible and I like these other coffees and they're delightful. Not like, oh, I like them okay. Like I enjoy it. So really stupid, cheesy thing. But I'm just saying that like there's people you might be like insanely attracted to and you might be like, wow, that chemistry. But it's not really a healthy chemistry.
Right.
And it's not really a healthy relationship. And overall you could be just as satisfied, if not more, because you have the whole package somewhere else.
Right. Exactly.
You know?
Exactly. An Elle Australia article by Deandra Malavindi she talks about it, how real is the DNA dating from the one. And it exists. It's not nearly as extensive as the one, and that really it ignores all of the environmental factors.
Yeah, completely.
Like entirely. And there are studies that have shown that if someone's natural body odor Now, not
Pheromones.
like their stink, not like their armpits after they've,
Yeah.
but like if you smell the top of their head or something and it's appealing to you, the chances are that you share different MHC or major histocompatibility complex genes, that they're different enough that you'd make a good pair. So if somebody smells gross to you, then your genes wouldn't mix well together. So, for example, my husband smells amazing to me.
You sniff him a lot, actually.
I do. I'm a little bothered that it's that obvious.
No, I consider myself somewhat of a closer friend here.
Yeah. Yes.
Who observes you all in
This
your
is
natural
true.
habitat more often than maybe others, at least right now.
That's right.
And that maybe like the pandemic and the stress of COVID may have increased the sniffing for the sake of comfort.
That's fair.
But I have definitely observed and witnessed this occurring.
Yes. He smells amazing to me.
This is why babies smell good, like their heads.
Yeah.
So that moms will take care of them.
Yes. We'll get there.
Ooh, yay, I got that one right.
A little bit. But my son, if I can't sniff the top of his head because he stinks to me.
Yeah, too much alike.
Now he's 16.
Yeah.
And my son, so ew.
Yeah.
But he does it like when he was a baby, he smelled wonderful to me. And now he does not smell good to me at all because here he is, this basically
grown man.
Yeah. Basically a
Sarah?
man. I know. Facial hair and everything.
I know.
Yeah.
I mean, I think this is probably, and I haven't done the research, but I will definitely visit some databases because I think that might be generalizable to other sorts of compatibility as well. For instance, you know how it's hard to partner with somebody who's exactly like you.
Yeah.
Right? So if your son and you have very, very similar genes in that you're kind of like, oh, we are too much alike. That also means you may not go into business later as partners either. Mm-hmm. Right? Like maybe that's a kind of like a sign. But some parents work really well with kids and end up having great family businesses that are able to be passed down, whereas others are like, oh, I can't even imagine working with my kids. So I wonder how generalizable it is to partnerships and, just joint endeavors in general.
Mm-hmm. I did read a different article that I didn't choose to cover today that had talked about how you would expect your friends to also smell good to you.
Yeah.
Because you have complementary genes rather than, but I mean, of course, there's a lot of other things that go into that as well.
Oh, 100,000 other things, but still, nevertheless, very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So James said that he helped with research that could measure love by seeing spikes in certain biochemicals in the brain. Mm-hmm. So he listed off estrogen, testosterone, adrenaline, dopamine, and serotonin.
Mm-hmm. The top common ones that people know.
Those are the names you know the most, but that's not quite how they work. So Harvard had I believe it was on Valentine's Day that they published this. Love, Actually, the Science Behind Lust, Attraction, and Companionship by Catherine Wu. And she said, yes, testosterone, estrogen, dopamine, all would have higher spikes when you're in love. One that he didn't mention that would absolutely probably be there was norepinephrine. Norepinephrine. Thank you.
Norepinephrine.
Okay. Norepinephrine. And those chemicals make you giddy, energetic, euphoric. You would definitely see a spike in those. But you would actually probably see a reduction in serotonin.
Interesting.
Because it's similar to people who suffer from obsessive compulsive disorder, that their levels of serotonin are lower. And that's what makes you obsessed with your person. It's a biological function that's happening to help you pair up.
Yeah, to seek out.
Yeah, to seek out. And so the reason you can't think of anything but that new partner is because your serotonin levels have dipped.
So that's the difference between dopamine and serotonin.
Yeah.
See, dopamine spikes and it's addicting.
Yeah.
Serotonin levels are satiating.
Okay.
Right, so they work in well, I don't know. Like I'm making a gesture right now.
Yeah, you're kind of trying to balance
and
them.
I don't know what I'm making, but I'm making some sort of gesture that explains
Well,
that.
because like your dopamine would go up because it feels good, but your serotonin would go down so that you would continue to think about that person. You're not satiated.
You're not satiated. Because if you're satiated and your serotonin's up and your dopamine's like lower, and so you're not getting that addicting feeling.
Right. You might not stay together.
Not so much.
Right.
Yeah. Like you're on the right path. Now, that's the thing about it. Like, all of this happens to get you together, but FYI, after a while, all of those things should shift, and you should enter into a healthy relationship which involves a lot of other things.
Yeah.
Exactly.
This is to get you together, to get you to pair up and match up and stay together, to get to know one another long enough to decide if you're really a good match.
Right.
It's
or
kind
if
of
you're
like
really, really just basic evolution.
Yeah.
You might think this is how to keep the species alive.
Yeah. Yes.
Because it'll force you to mate.
Yes.
So hopefully it keeps the species alive.
Right.
If you're being that base about it. But yeah.
Okay.
That makes sense.
So is genetic sexual attraction even a thing? It's a pseudoscience.
It's kind of
It's not. So really what people, when they talk about genetic sexual attraction and they're trying to make it sound scientific, it's usually because they want to do incest, and that's kind of gross. Yeah. Well, they're saying that there is an idea that when closely related people meet for the first time as adults and don't know that they're closely related, that there might be a genetic sexual attraction.
Okay.
Because they don't realize that they're related but their genes are closely matched together, and they didn't have a close relationship, particularly between siblings or children and parents. Mm-hmm. So if they were adopted out and then they meet these people later, they didn't have the chance for the Westermarck effect to take hold, which is kind of reverses any sexual imprinting on those people. The familiarity of the relationship makes it so that you don't want to sleep with parents
family.
Or siblings, particularly close ones. And the idea that might happen is kind of supported by research in mice, that when they adopt them out and then bring them back together, that they'll mate. But mice aren't very particular and not nearly as complex as humans.
It's not even about an attraction really with mice. I mean, the things there's so many other things that attract a person or a mouse to another mouse that you can't control for that.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, mice are cute. You can't make an ugly mouse and then ask one, do you want to mate with it? Like, that's not how that works.
No.
Even if the mouse was less cute.
Yeah.
They're all cute. I'm sorry. I really do love mice and rats, and they're just so adorable with their little noses.
All over the place.
They're just so
all
cute.
over. Yeah.
Anyway. This sounds...
but this was what was confusing to me a little bit about the one, was that they were matching up. We'll get into some of that science here in a little bit. But they were matching people up, and I was like, what happens if they match with a brother or sister because they're closely related? They're looking for commonalities in their genes.
Well, now they mentioned this a little bit. Now, I've only watched the first episode, so I haven't gone deeper. I don't know what else they've revealed about their process. But I distinctly remember that James was studying ants. And they were looking at particularly how ants choose, because apparently ants are more choosy than you might expect ants to be about who they build their colony with. So what causes them to be, to choose them, which is, I think, how they try to deal with the nurture situation.
Right.
Because they're choosing. They're not actually attracted sexually. The ants are choosing who to be with.
Right.
And build their colony with. And so James had said that they had found a correlation. Now, I don't even think he said correlation, but when he was talking, I kept going, correlation! It's the word. You're missing it. Okay, so he had found that these ants, the ones that they chose, had a similar genetic predisposition.
We'll get to all that.
Yeah, so, I mean, I guess I understand that somebody might ask the question.
Right.
I can understand why somebody might study it because it's not really dealing with even attraction. It's
Right.
dealing with who do you choose.
Right.
Which is why I think they got to the one.
And it was an irresistible bond.
Right. Like you can't deny it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was what they were talking about.
Yeah. So
In humans,
not so much, guys. Not so much.
pseudoscience.
Yeah, not so much.
No.
There's some correlations, I'm sure.
Uh-huh.
Lots of correlations.
Mm-hmm. So Hannah sent the one some little clips of hair.
I mean, like clips.
Like tiny.
She didn't even pull those suckers from the root.
No. Exactly. And so right now, most hair analysis that would look at that could look at that and tell you if people were related by blood, but it wouldn't. It's a relational thing, not a whole DNA thing.
Yeah, they can't sequence everything.
Right. Yeah, well, they can, which is what I'm going to talk about here.
Tell me about this.
They can. So
I didn't think that they could sequence the full.
It's new, relatively new.
Okay.
So late 2019 was when this was published, the Genome of British Columbia. They talked to Dr. Ed Green, and he had been trying to determine DNA from fossilized dinosaur bone.
Okay.
So he figured out a technique to be able to do that, and he wanted to see how well it worked.
Okay.
So he took a strand of his hair without a root and was able to pull a DNA sequence out of that matched a saliva sample from himself.
Wow.
So
right.
he did that. So he was able to get it using this technique that was being used for dinosaur DNA.
Okay.
Which is a whole thing.
It's a whole thing.
Maybe,
That's cool.
Maybe don't do it. But it's super expensive, so it's not going to get used very much.
Makes
so
sense.
it's possible, but it's not feasible right now. But, who knows? We know that things change. I mean, it took, like $1 billion to sequence the first DNA, and now you can do it for $100.
Right. Exactly. So, okay, well, that's cool.
Yeah.
So it's sort of true, but it's not here yet, really.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. So this was the thing that we were talking about just a minute ago.
Okay.
So they kept talking about CHCs.
Yes.
Cuticular hydrocarbons. As this was the thing in ants that creates this irresistible bond between them because they are related. They belong to the same colony. So that's how ants from different colonies know which colony to go back to.
That makes sense.
Because they can smell each other. It's a desiccant barrier. So they don't dry out. That's got all these smells and things. And it's a special signature that's done with their physiology. So how old they are they sexually mature? Are they fertile? And then their genetics. So it's this kind of dual information stuff. Okay. So that all makes sense. Okay. It seems like you can match people on that. Let's extrapolate it. Except people don't have CHCs. Only insects have CHCs.
Right.
And they specifically say, we found the CHCs in the human.
They did say that, didn't they?
It's only in ants. It doesn't exist in
See,
people.
that feels like they should have just written it better and done this happened here, and so we decided we had something similar, and here's what we found. Right? They could have taken that extra step.
Right. And that's the difference between ants and people too, is that most ants aren't mating.
Yeah, right.
There's a queen and some drones, I think, dude ants.
Dude ants.
Most of them are not reproducing. So their genetic bond comes from the fact that they're closely related so that they know that this is the people in their group.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's their colony. So it's a little squicky.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
A little bit.
Yeah. That was kind of a hashtag fail.
All of the sources that we use to inform our discussion here on Killer Fun Podcast can be found on our social media. Join us on Facebook at Killer Fun Podcast, exploring the intersection of crime and entertainment. You can find us on Twitter at Killer Fun Pod, or you can send us an email at killerfunpodcast@gmail.com, and I'd be happy to share a link to whatever information you're looking for. We love to hear from you. You might learn a little something too. All right, psychology break.
Let's do it.
All right. So Rebecca said that loving and being loved makes us human. And it might not be what makes us human, though I see how it works for her marketing strategy. But it is a human need.
It is pretty basic. It does. I don't agree with the like straightforward just love and being loved makes us human statement, like period. However, it's like one of those, she's not wrong,
but she's not quite right.
She's not quite right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I feel about it.
Raj Raghunathan wrote for Psychology Today, The Need to Love, and he talks about how our happiness often comes from feeling cared for, but it as much comes for caring for others.
Right.
Okay. So it makes sense that you would want that kind of symbiotic relationship that they're trying to portray in the one. So that's not wrong, but it's not right.
It's really, because it's like, well, love in general, yeah.
Yes.
But what she's peddling
is romantic
love.
Right.
And so it's a facet. It's the way that, let's be honest, a vast majority of us want that and receive a lot of those benefits from that relationship. But this idea of marrying for love is so new.
It's really super new.
It's really so super new.
We're going to get to all that.
Oh, good. Let's get to that because I got to get to that.
Okay. So let's talk quickly about the biochemistry of love.
Okay. Let's do it.
So that it's bidirectional sort of situation. There's a dynamic process and a biological process that go into love. So we've talked about, there's social factors and different things that go into that. And it's believed that the evolution to desire this is something that happened in mammals so that we could make adult relationships, rather than mating and separating. That it's more beneficial. We survive better as a species if we have bonds with people. And it's makes sense that a mother would bond with their baby. But having those adult bonds is really important to the survival and success of our species. And they were talking about the parental bond, the mother bond, but fathers and grandfathers and other adoptive parents all seem to, form similar sorts of attachments with a child. This was so interesting. Preliminary evidence suggests that simply the presence of an infant releases oxytocin in adults. The baby virtually forces us to love it.
Yes, they
Which
do.
I'm like, oh, that's so nice. It was so interesting. And it's not solely for humans.
It's not. It
happens many different types of animals, primates, canines.
In fact, the amount of cuteness from a baby actually can determine the level of care and love it gets. So obviously we know that cuteness is subjective. So somebody could find somebody less cute than other people find that person. But there have been studies that show that when a baby is missing some of those key features that contribute to that baby cuteness, that they actually do receive less attention, especially in daycare environments.
Oh, that makes sense.
So they were looking at how do we better standardize care in these situations and blah, blah, blah. So, which is kind of hard because, all babies are cute, but let's be honest, some have situations going on that might mitigate cuteness for a while.
Have you ever looked back at pictures of your own babies when they were brand new?
Oh, yeah, like when they're brand new.
Yeah, and hours old, and you look at them and you thought they were the most beautiful thing you had ever seen in your life, and you go back and you look, and you're like, oh, look how red and pointy their head was.
Right, weird. I feel bad, my second son had severe eczema. So for months, his face was covered with rash, but I could see through that. I saw all the cuteness, but I could see that if I could see how, not that the study is saying this will happen, but I could see how if I were to leave him in the care of others who were not the mother.
Or a parent. Yeah.
Or a parent, right? That he might, in his appearance with the eczema, not elicit the same sort of attentional care from a village caregiver, right? Like somebody in the network in the village.
Right.
Right. But, and that's sad to say, but it's one of those like, well, everything has a benefit, and well, then if there's a benefit, there's likely a
the
a
opposite
weakness,
of that. Yeah.
Right. There's some kind of weakness there. And
Right.
that's kind of the weakness of it. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So Rebecca also said that people who were in truly happy relationships would have never sent in their samples to be tested, is a way of mitigating her responsibility when it came to the divorce rates.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I didn't agree with that at all.
No, not at all. And in fact, the wonderful Esther Perel.
Oh, I love her.
I know, she's amazing.
I love her.
She had an article in the Atlantic in their October 2017 issue about why happy people cheat. A good marriage is no guarantee against infidelity. And she talks a whole lot about a number of different things that it's very painful to have a spouse cheat on you, and it makes you question everything. But it's really interesting what they reveal about relationships and she talks about the idea that in Western culture, we marry for love, that it used to really be that it was an economic enterprise.
Yes.
Now it's a companionate one. And that is new and challenging. So where they used to ignore it a bit because the marriages were
all around, they were beneficial to your survival.
Right.
Even maybe you're thriving in the world at large.
Right. It was more, they didn't see it as something to provide you with love.
Yeah. She says it a lot. She says this phrase a lot. And she's not the only one that says it, but it's a new thing to expect a spouse to provide for our physical needs and beneficial, stability in the world at large, as well as provide us with a feeling of comfort and being beloved, as well as also challenge us enough to grow and develop into our full idealized self. That was never all in one thing. That was always a separated thing. And the marriage was actually just the financial economy part.
Right.
And kind of maybe seeped into the whole companionship, feeling loved, feeling cared for, but never really was thought to be the place where you become your idealized self.
No.
That was always in some sort of contribution to the world at large.
Right.
Right? Which we as Americans would call work.
Right.
So it's a weird new thing that we do now.
Right. Yes. And she talks about that she said the most common thing that people say when they're having an affair is, it makes me feel alive.
Right.
Yeah. So that's not a spouse thing.
No.
That's a individual thing.
That's correct.
So it is cruel, selfish, dishonest, abusive, perhaps, for the person who has been betrayed. But she says she often asks this question, what if the affair had nothing to do with you, the betrayed person? What if it's all about the person who was doing the betraying, trying to find out something about themselves that they might be looking for, not so much for something else, but they're looking for a different version of themselves.
Right.
So they're looking at now, and the lady that she's talking about in this particular article, it's fascinating, wonderful read. She was very happy with her husband. He was a good provider. They both had jobs they loved. They had wonderful children. They were attracted to one another. He was handsome. She felt so bad about it, but she'd always been doing the right thing. Ever since she was a little kid. She went to the right school. She married the right man. She did all the right things. And this was kind of a way of her trying on a different personality. Yeah. It had really almost nothing to do with her husband.
That's right. But that's exactly what hurts.
Well, right.
And, it is hard because she makes the point several times in other, platforms that for some reason, this particular betrayal is unique in the type of pain it causes a person. And what's very interesting is although she talks about how this is brand new and we've never expected so much out of a spouse, she always stops short of saying it's wrong.
Right.
She always stops short of saying we shouldn't do that. It's almost like she understands that maybe in the future, marrying for love, we'll get it right. We'll understand what that entails. But right now, we're not quite understanding how to make it really that successful. Because it is true. I think that's the betrayal. People feel the betrayal that somebody wouldn't come to them to want to feel alive, or come to them to feel something new, or ask them to say, hey, I want to do this crazy weird thing. Like, come with me because I've made a commitment to you and all of this. And that's exactly the betrayal that hurts, is that you, as the person who was victimized by or betrayed by this, got left out of this version of that person that you love.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what is painful. So she talks about that in a different podcast. And she's got actually some really great healing exercises. She's got really forward thinking about it. So she's thankfully a full source. Like, she doesn't just come in and like wreck you.
No.
Right? Like, she's got things to say about it. I highly recommend her.
She, in fact, has a quote about just that. Not condemning does not mean condoning, and there is a world of difference between understanding and justifying.
Amen, sister.
She's so well spoken.
Oh gosh, she's so
she
good.
She's just amazing. She understands humans and human sexuality in a way that few people have before.
Oh, it's so
and
true.
She's so empathetic to everybody.
Yes, she is.
In a situation, which is, can really be healing. It can be difficult. But it can be difficult. But it can be also very healing.
Yes, indeed.
All right, real life.
Real life.
Just because it's not as full-bodied as it appears in the one doesn't mean that people aren't trying to do DNA dating.
Oh, Lord.
So there are a couple of women from Houston, and they had come up with a dating app called Pheromore, and it was like a virtual dating pool where you sent in a swab from your cheek. And there were a couple places in Canada who'd tried to do similar things. All of them are defunct.
I mean,
all of them, because it's just, people are going to try it.
It makes me think of matchmaking. Because, all right, so in the show, like, we're watching, and Kate, she gets matched with Sophia. Right? And so they meet, and they're both kind of giddy and excited, and they come together with this common ground. We've been matched. So all of a sudden, they're already, linking together with a common history and a common thing. So that helps a lot. They don't have to find something. They don't have to find out much about the other person. They come into it with this knowledge that they're somehow linked, that somebody else has said, this is going to work. Try this. And so there's less pressure, even if there's bigger nerves. And there's more excitement, even if there's stability.
Yeah.
So, well, that's a beautiful try. Who wouldn't want that?
Right.
But it made me immediately think of, but y'all are coming in like, preconceived notions. Well, that's what matchmaking used to do.
Right.
People would look and matchmake, and it helped. At that time, the thought was it helped them to sort of like start off on the right foot and everything like that. And well, okay, if you start off on the right foot, maybe that does give you a good solid history. And when you hit challenges, you're better suited to handle it. I don't know, but nobody's matchmaking anymore either.
Well, that's not entirely true. There's
professionally,
there's plenty of arranged marriages where the idea that your parents, people who know you best, have chosen a mate for you.
I guess.
And, you hear, particularly in Indian culture, a lot of people who get along really, really well.
So I feel like those arranged marriages are more hearkening to an older standard of the economic, not the matchmaking, like, I hired a matchmaker to find the one.
That's fair.
That's what I'm thinking about. Like, to me, there's a big difference between arranged marriages and matchmaker.
Because the arranged marriages are looking at not just personality, but economic factors.
Yeah, the whole package.
They're looking at the whole package. A matchmaker is trying to find you a lover.
A lover, the one.
The one.
So it's like, and that you don't see anymore.
That is the difference.
You don't see anymore.
Well, I don't know. Wasn't there a show called Millionaire Matchmaker?
Really?
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
Not like pretty recently. Like, it's hard for rich people to date because they never know if somebody just wants them for their money. Let me find you a date.
All right, well, that might be fair. That might be a fair, like, there may be exceptions. Yeah.
All right. Does online dating affect divorce rates?
Oh, yes. Tell
This
me.
was the whole thing that the one had caused a huge spike in divorce rates.
Yeah, like economic instability across the board.
Right, because they were people who were already married, already paired up, were matching and finding that they weren't matched with their spouse.
Uh-huh.
Okay, but if your spouse isn't in the database, there's no way you can match with them.
That's right. Like, hello.
Plot holes you can drive trucks through, but whatever.
Great.
It seems that there's good news.
Okay.
That it's actually a slightly higher marriage satisfaction rate among people who met online and then dated.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I'm not shocked.
No.
I'm maybe a little surprised.
Well, okay, you have to take into account, too, that fewer people are getting married now.
That's true, too.
So if fewer people get married, they can't get divorced. This is not counting people who break up. They did a little bit of research into that they included a little bit of that, but not as it's more difficult.
And that's okay. I guess I can understand that, but I am interested. I am a little surprised that the marriages are...
Well, they attribute it to people taking questionnaires and the algorithms matching people who have similar interests or have compatible interests. And that it's actually maybe good for society as a whole because you're dating outside of your social circle. You're going to have a broader range of people who you might not otherwise meet.
That's true.
And there's more interracial partnerships happening, and that interracial partnerships are good for society as a whole because when you know somebody who's dating somebody whose skin has a different level of melanin.
No. Oh, no, melanin.
I almost said melatonin.
I know. And then I was like, melatonin? No,
melanin. You know, that it can, if you see those people getting along, it reduces prejudice and racism within the society as a whole. So it gets a little better. People are a little more accepting.
What are the age ranges, may I ask? Did they tell? Did they say? Did they report it? I guess I'm skeptical. I'm so skeptical. Or maybe I'm a cynic. Maybe I'm getting to cynicism because I feel like those dating platforms give somebody an opportunity to present who they want to be, not who they are.
Well, that's true of dating in general.
I know, but like I feel like it just would perpetuate it even longer. It's bad enough out there in the real world. Like, I guess I wonder how much that helps or hurts. But other social media research shows that most people actually end up presenting who they really are, even though they try to present an idealized self. And that not only that, most people can see through it.
Oh, so yeah, they can see through your lying.
So maybe that's why it's helpful, because even if you are presenting your idealized self, maybe it's a little easier to see through it, but then also maybe support that person. So it's not like a shock.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's interesting.
Yeah. I thought it was really interesting too. Because I've known couples who've been both ways.
Yeah.
You know, they met online and they were like, it did not work out and I should have seen the signs, but I didn't. And then people who it worked out and, well, you know, everybody changes, which is true. I mean, and that's something that's difficult to account for too, is, you know, if they're together 4, 5, 6, 10 years, they're different people. That might not have anything to do with how they met.
No. I mean, there might be a correlation between that type of changing and the aptitude to use an app, or the desire to use an app might correlate with some sort of predictable personality traits or personality changes or developments. But causal? Gosh, no.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's so difficult to know.
Host and environmental things
factors
that go into that. You know, like for instance, you could say a big confound in that is that people who went online to date were more serious to begin with.
Well, and that was something that they mentioned too. Yeah, that they were more likely to really be ready to enter into a relationship.
Right, which means even if that person met somebody in person who also was like them, they might have a higher chance of success anyways.
Right.
So
yeah, it's difficult to know.
Yeah.
So hand in hand with divorce is adultery,
Yeah.
which we talked a little bit about, but it's still technically illegal in some places.
Well, yeah, it is a contract.
Yes, but so it was 2018 when India finally made adultery not a crime.
Okay.
Okay. And the UN has actually been pushing governments to repeal laws that make adultery a crime because they predominantly discriminate against women. In cultures where they still exist, they are used to target women who've committed adultery and not men.
Well, that's true.
They're
The woman is
unevenly
usually
applied.
dependent.
Right.
So she doesn't have the means to uphold their end of the contract. I mean,
Right.
women by and large across the whole planet are the weaker partner. Not in person. I'm saying
They're
they have
economically.
they have the least leverage in the partnership.
Right. That's fair. Because it's a discriminatory
Gotcha.
against women.
Okay.
That's why they're pushing for it. And most European countries repealed those laws like in the 70s
yeah.
and 80s. Like all of Europe was without these laws by like 2006. Latin America is similar. It was in the 90s for them, but
Yeah.
it's mostly gone. However, in the United States, 21 states still consider it a crime, including New York, which it's only a misdemeanor there. But in Idaho, Massachusetts, Michigan, Oklahoma, and Wisconsin, it's a felony crime
Whoa.
punishable by prison.
Wow.
But enforcement is extremely rare.
I can imagine. So
Yeah, because
I could see how. All right, so I'm gonna I don't know, brainstorm this a little bit.
Sure.
I could see how overall laws about it being a crime could target women because they don't have the means to. But also making it a crime should relieve the burden of prosecution from the victim.
right.
Right? Like if you are attacked and somebody mugs you, it's the police department, it's the city, state, whatever. They're the ones who prosecute, pay for it, and enforce that. And you as the victim, you do not have that burden. However, if you wanted to say, well, he also hurt my leg and I want more payment from him, now you can go to civil court and you can sue for the attack to get more money.
Right.
So theoretically, I could see how policymakers might have thought by making it a crime, it actually leveled the playing field. Mm-hmm. But it hasn't.
Yeah, it didn't. That might have been an initial goal.
Maybe.
But it didn't work out that way.
No,
if that was ever the intention, it didn't work.
But I could see how it would if people did it. But I could see how our systematic oppressions, the things that are kind of baked in just from the ignorance of humans being humans, could have that adverse impact could be astounding.
Yeah.
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 Interesting.
Hair analysis, when it's available, might turn out to be a better forensic tool than DNA.
Ooh.
When the FBI examines hair that they can't pull DNA from, it's a visual analysis.
Right.
And they acknowledged that microscopic hair analysis was flawed in 90% of their cases.
Yeah, it was bad.
It was
that was a big boo-boo.
Really, really bad. And so DNA it also has its flaws. It's better, but it has its flaws, especially now that there's this influx of touch DNA where you've touched a doorknob and have left a few skin cells behind and stuff like that. There's a huge possibility of contamination. Somebody else touched the doorknob before you. You shook hands with somebody, ended up with a few of their cells. You touched a doorknob somewhere else. You left their DNA behind. They were never in that location.
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully that'll be better now that people are washing their hands more.
Well, let's hope.
But, there's also mix-ups in laboratories, different things like that can really cause issues. But they found another way to analyze hair, and it has to do with proteins.
Okay, yeah.
That the proteins in your hair, they're unaltered by things like hair dye and things like that. So, and they're unique to you. So if they can extrapolate the proteins, they can do a better job, a more accurate job of identifying whose hair that belonged to.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
That's good.
I thought it was really cool.
Progress.
Yeah. And then Rebecca mentioned that she'd considered raising the minimum age, of being matched by the one, but that 18 to 25-year-olds were such a big market.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I was like, well, I mean, don't you have enough money already? But she had a point because the human brain isn't fully mature until 25.
It's true.
Yep. Neurobiologist Robert Sapolsky told BigThink.com that the frontal cortex isn't complete until about the age of 25, which is why young people tend to be more reckless, that they tend to either be more adventurous and open, or they're more likely to react strongly to an other. That it makes they're more reckless in their behavior.
Yeah, they don't have the mitigation tools. Right.
They might either be, and it tends to be kind of a either or situation.
Yeah.
They're either really accepting or they're really closed-minded in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard because teenagers, and I mean, we know that they have not fully formed brains, and yet they're remarkable.
Right.
I mean, they're so remarkable, but it's because of their malleability at that point. And it's interesting. Teenagers are very, very interesting.
Well, and this is why they come up with really great ideas and really out of the box thinking, things that older people would never consider.
That's right.
It's also why they do stupid things sometimes, but it's also what makes them amazing and innovative. And all right, so next time. All right, so we wanted to do something a little funny, but it's sci-fi related to this.
Yeah.
A little bit. So we're going to watch the first couple episodes of the
iZombie.
Yeah. Like a comedy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
I'm
I think
excited.
it's going to, have you seen any of it ever? It's fun. It's fun and silly. Same people that made Veronica Mars. And it's just, it's got its nice crimey element. It's got a little weird sci-fi element. It's not DNA, but almost kind of DNA in a sci-fi environment.
Interesting.
We'll get there. Yeah. So join us next time. Rate and review anywhere you get your pods. Make sure you tell a friend. It's way more fun when you can listen with a friend. Talk about we don't know what we're talking about. Or, man, did you hear their insightful thoughts? Or I hadn't thought about that with this show that I thought was just a dumb thing that I was watching to pass the time because people won't put a mask on their face or whatever,
Yes.
Until next time, be safe, be kind, and wash your hands.
Da, 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 da.